How many of you, it may date you a little bit, grew up with magic eyes? Remember magic eyes? They were the paintings, or I guess they were more prints. They were the 1990s version of NFTs, right? And it's like a colored pattern. And I had a problem with magic eyes because I could never see them. And I would get very angry at an early age. No, not really. But I would think, why can everyone else see this cow in this pattern and all I see is a bunch of shapes and colors? It looked like a kind of cool design, but you couldn't see it. You remember those? And then you'd have people that would say, why can't you see them? You just put your nose up really close and you look through it and you slowly back away. Remember this? You've tried these techniques? I've tried all of them. I literally was in my office this morning and I was like, I'm going to try that again. So I've got my computer at my face. I probably spent a good 5 minutes doing this. Couldn't see a thing. Couldn't see a thing. So if you're unable to see magic eyes like me, welcome. If I was a young age and I saw those magic eyes and I couldn't see the thing you're supposed to see, I wouldn't think to myself, you know what, I need some new eyes. Because my eyes see, right? I would think to myself, I need a new way of seeing. I don't just need new eyes physically. I need to see something that is there, allegedly. I think it's a conspiracy theory anyways, but it's allegedly there, but I can't see it. I don't need new eyes. I need a new way of seeing. In Mark chapter 8, Jesus is going to walk us through 3 parts of what it means to see. And I don't mean see physically. There is one blind man that does receive sight, but see who he is and what God is doing. And my hope in the end of this is as we learn with the disciples, we will also desire the seeing that Jesus gives to us. If you've been with us, we're in this Gospel of Mark, and for the first 8 chapters, Jesus has authority over the body, over politics, over religious structures. Jesus has authority to make meaningful action in all these places. And as we trust him, he does amazing things. And he's showing his authority. In Mark chapter 8, it's like a dividing line. There's Mark, first part of Mark, second part of Mark. Now he's going to show us Jesus is under the plan of God. Jesus is under even suffering. So first he has authority, and now we're going to see a vulnerability and a sacrifice that's leading Jesus to his purpose. Now in that verse 11 I just read, you notice the Pharisees are here. They are the religious people that are looking for the Messiah. They have all of the prophecy, all of the understanding that this Messiah is coming, and yet they don't see. He sighed deeply because they were asking for a sign. They wanted to validate that this Jesus was the Messiah. Now, I don't think this sign was actually to validate God as much as was to validate their own opinions. And they're basically saying, we can't believe unless we see. We need to see a sign. We need to see proof that you are real. So in the next part, we see Jesus and a blind man. So let's pick up in verse 22. I didn't read that yet. And they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" What is so striking about this interaction with Jesus in this man, in this village? What's so striking about this? 2 things. Jesus leads him out of the village, possibly because this village didn't believe and Jesus is bringing him out of the village. Right before this, Jesus had healed a deaf man in chapter 7 because he took him out of the crowds. So there's like a separateness. But what I find most intriguing about this scripture is Jesus' physical connection to this man. Notice the physical touch, this physical engagement. People are bringing this blind man. Jesus touches him. He takes the blind man. He leads the blind man by the hand. He spits on his eyes. He lays his hands on him. This man is receiving a physical movement from all these other people, and Jesus himself is interacting with this man in a tangible way. It's not just like, be healed, good luck. Jesus is engaged with this man in a very tangible way. He spits on him, which was ritually unclean in the Pharisees' understanding, would have impurely defiled this man, and yet somehow that is God's method for healing this man. Now, in the Old Testament, there are 3 things that would cause you to lay hands on someone. I'll just give this a brief, real overview. Dedicating a sacrifice to God, like a bull or a ram. You lay hands on it to consecrate it. Dedicating a man to priestly service, to function as a priest and overseer of God's church, or God's people, God's worshiping community. And thirdly, to receive a blessing. So sacrifices, priests, and blessings would have received a laying on of hands. And what this laying on of hands signifies is making something profane sacred. It's taking something common like an animal or a man or a circumstance and making it sacred and purposed for God. The bull is touched. It's no longer an animal, but it's a atonement and a sacrifice. The man is touched. He's not just a human. He's a communicator of divine things and a coordinator of the worship of God. It's when we give things to God, it's called making them holy. You may have heard that word. Holy means set apart. It means for the sake of God. And yet what Jesus is doing with this man who receives his sight, he's not necessarily taking a profane thing, his blindness, and making it holy as much as he's taking the holiness and the beauty of God and putting it on him. And this is a pattern that Jesus is going to walk out until his death, where he is not just overlaying a godly thing on this person, but bringing a weight and a holiness through him, Jesus himself, to this person. And he looked up, this man looked up and said, I see people, but they look like trees walking. And then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes, and his sight was restored. And he saw everything clearly. And he sent him to his home, saying, do not even enter the village. Now, this is the only recorded miracle of Jesus that happens in stages. Only recorded miracle that happens in stages, and the only miracle that Jesus follows up with a question. Okay, how's it going? Right? Do you see anything now? Oh, Jesus obviously is not surprised by this. It's not like he needed this person, but I like this because it shows Jesus' engagement with us. He says, okay, what are you seeing now? Can you see clearly now? He's inviting this man into a relationship. How often do we believe that God gives us new eyes and then never ask him anything again? Oh, God gave us new eyes, I can see clearly now. And God gives us new eyes. How often do we go back and say, God, am I seeing this correctly? Am I seeing as you would see? You see, the disciples, which are Jesus' followers, are learning about faith. They're learning about what it means to follow Jesus, to walk with Jesus. And so the story of the Pharisees that can't see what's right in front of their eyes, and the story of this man receiving his sight and then seeing, now leads us to the conversation Jesus has with his disciples about who do you see me to be, is what Jesus is going to ask these disciples. It's all working together. These people don't see because they don't believe. This man receives from Jesus and sees. Now, will you also see and believe? And Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on his way, and on the way, this is important, on the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they told him, "John the Baptist. Others say Elijah, and others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." And he strictly charged them to tell no one about him. The religious people who were expected to see the Messiah, who had planned this coming, the second coming, they were waiting for this release from political slavery and obscurity. They're waiting for someone to come, God himself, and release them from these evil people. Missed it. They couldn't see it. And Peter, this pretty common fisherman, sees it. You're the Christ. Now, if you're thinking you're Peter, you're thinking, we should tell everyone now. This is a big deal because we've been living in poverty and slavery for a long time, and we have the Messiah. We'd like to no longer live in poverty and slavery, right? You're thinking, this is great. Now, ironically, the place that this happens is one of the most ungodly places in all of the ancient world. It's called Caesarea Philippi. And they had a god there that was their god, the god Pan, who was half god and half goat. You can't make this stuff up. You're like, you would worship a half god, half goat? Yeah, that's our God. He's our guy. Okay. They would worship this Pan god. They would do all kinds of ungodly sacrifices of all kinds of things. And pagan means country folk. It means rural folk. It means way out there. People that aren't like rightly walking with God in a Jewish sense. And so Jesus, in this place of the greatest darkness, we see the confession of Peter, the hope of Jesus as the brightest light. It's the greatest darkness. It's the most atrocious of human injustice. And in this place, we see this confession of Peter, seeing who Jesus is. Now notice he says, Jesus went on with his disciples and on the way. We're going to hear that phrase 9 more times in the next 4 chapters. On the way. Faith, seeing, discipleship, godly living, it's on the way. By that I mean it's not static, it's dynamic, it's movement-oriented, it's meant to be experienced and lived out. It's not meant to be studied and worked on and practiced in a journal only. It's meant to be, as they were going, Jesus is teaching them what it means to follow him and be disciples. It's describing the godly life. Faith means following Jesus' lead. You're following in the lead of Jesus. You're not demanding signs. You're not just here to receive a blessing. You're not just choosing your own path. All right, Jesus saved me. Now I'm going to do the rest of my life in a Christian way. No, it's a transformation of your entire purpose and identity. Now, this is why the common cultural church really screws up the gospel, is because we've allowed really bland, complacent spirituality to replace life-giving, joyful following of Jesus. And so when people see discipleship or following Jesus in really like boring ways, they think, yeah, that looks terrible. But what Jesus is offering is actually life itself. And when we choose to follow in faith, it's not I'm going to add these 3 things to my list. No, I'm engaged in a life transformation of moving towards godly living. And he says to the disciples, who do you say that I am? He doesn't allow them to just say, oh, I think you're this, and we're going to pause it on this and consider that. No, what do you think? How have you seen me? How are you walking with? Who do you say? And Peter rightly says, you are the Christ. This is an amazing, amazing statement by Peter. And then Jesus goes on, as we know, to correct Peter's understanding. Notice that? Peter says, you're the Christ. You'd think he got it. He's good. And yet, when Jesus begins to clarify what it means that he is the Christ, Peter's like, I'm not down with that. Verse 31. And Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. Oh, that's not the Messiah I was looking for, Peter says. No. I want to be materially satisfied, grain, olive oil, wine. That's the kingdom I'm looking for in Old Testament. I'm looking for military strength. I'm looking for spiritual influence, leadership. We want Jesus to be on parade. Jesus lead the way. That's the Messiah they're looking for. And Jesus says, this is not the way of the kingdom. And Peter, he said this plainly, and Peter took him aside. Oh no. You feel it, right? You're like, oh, this is not going to go well. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. You've ever been out with some friends? Your friend's getting a little unruly. You know, they're kind of going off the chains a little bit. You know, a little too much Oreos and milk, kids, you know what I'm saying? And your friend's out, and you're like, hey, let's come over here. Come on. I know this be killed and elders and scribes, and this is a little bit. Come on, but the words Peter uses, rebuke, is actually the same as you would rebuke a demonic spirit. And this is what Peter does to Jesus. So right after, you notice this? Right after, you're the Christ, you're the Messiah, you're here to save the world, amen, but I'm now going to rebuke you? It's the greatest victory and fail all in 12 seconds. You're like, how did you possibly say, you're the Christ, so I will trust you and believe you, but no, come over here. I need to rebuke you. And he says, get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. I mean, how many of us can just take that verse? You are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. If we just learned that this week, if we just read that every morning, 15 minutes, our first 15 minutes were dedicated to, Lord, help me set my mind on the things of God today. If that was our focus, that would be faithfully walking with Jesus and learning the way of God. Because Jesus says the Son of Man will be displayed in glory through suffering, through sacrifice, through giving his life for others. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. Peter, you're wrong about that. Now we say, we would never do that. Peter, you're so silly. We would never say that to Jesus. We look anachronistically. Oh, stop trying, Shawn. We look back and say, oh, that's so silly, Peter. I would never say that to Jesus. It's like the irony of good novel. You ever read a good novel or watch a good show and you're like, don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, he did it. Oh, no. And you think, I would never do that. And yet the reader forgets that most of the time we're more like Peter than we are like the reader. And the irony as we read those stories is we're engaged with, how do we also, Jesus, you are the Christ, with our words. But our beliefs say, we know better. A wrong view of Jesus and the purpose of Jesus' life will lead to a wrong view of your purpose and what you can expect in your life. If you expect Jesus to only be victorious and only to rule in power and only to come and bring absolute healing and victory, then we've missed what Jesus says. I've come to suffer and to die and to be raised again. There is victory, there is resurrection, and there is hope. But it's not just immediate. Jesus goes down to suffer and then to allow God to raise him up. I think many of us are more like Peter. We proclaim Jesus with our words and our simple actions, but our whole identity is not built on being followers of Jesus. And calling to the crowd to him with the disciples, he said to them, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." Now, the word life here that Jesus uses is psyche. It means psychology. It means who you are designed as a person, your identity, your person, the things you love, the things you choose, the lifestyle you live, the clothes you wear, your whole person. For if your whole person is set on building your own person, you will lose your life. But if your whole person is set on giving your life for the sake of Jesus and the gospel, you will find it. It's a very weird phrase, isn't it? If you read that, you think, this is very odd. Jesus isn't suggesting that the disciples just choose new things to do. You know, as Jews, you may have done this washing and this checkbox and this thing. We don't do these three things anymore. Now we do these three things. He's not saying that you just change your to-do list. Like, these three things, bad. These three things, good. What Jesus is saying is your whole person has to change in faith. He's inviting them in to explore what motivates them, what drives them, what they're hungry for, what they're missing, what they're longing for, how they live their lives, how they spend their money, how they work on their calendar, whatever it is. Jesus is inviting them into a transformation. And so it's not just, do you believe in the Christ? Have you aligned your life with the purposes of the kingdom? And this is why we may have eyes, but we need to go back to Jesus regularly and say, Lord, are we seeing correctly? We have eyes that you've given us, but now we need more understanding and seeing. And as Christians, it's not just a new change, but it's a reinstatement of God's original intention of the purpose of human life. It's a changed game. So what do we do to save our lives? Or what do we do to build our lives? We pursue education. We pursue career advancement. We may build a family. We may build a house. We may focus on a project. What do we do to cement in our identity and who we are? There's plenty of things we're doing to pursue our own life. And Jesus is saying, I'm not going to measure success on victory, on influence, and on visibility. I'm going to measure my success on rejection and suffering and death. Most of us probably measure ourselves more along the world standards than we do on God's standards. When I give my life, I lose my life, I find it. What does that mean? If you're a mother, you know what this means. I read the verse, you're like, I get it. Because in motherhood, you suffer for 10 months, right? I don't know this. I've heard this through the grapevine. You grow a person in your body for 10 months, right? Like Becca is pregnant, right? We're so happy for Becca. Yay, Becca, little baby boy. Brutus is going to be so beautiful. I can't wait. For 10 months, you can't sleep. You can't eat. You hate everything. Everything smells bad, right? You are insufferable. It's so, you get like a couple, like 10 weeks in there, don't you? Like second trimester, that you're like, oh, this isn't too bad. And then it gets even worse. And it culminates, right, with the most painful experience known to man, or, well, known to woman. Motherhood is a good example of how you don't sleep for years. You give your body, your mind, your soul, your anxiety, everything you have changes when you have a child. Now, what's the difference in motherhood and babysitting? Both provide meals for the child. Both call 911 in an emergency. both provide play toys and other things. You could say on the outside, a babysitter is the same as a mother, but you would never say that, right? You would never say that a babysitter is a mother. Okay, I've done some cleaning, she does some cleaning, he does some cleaning. It's an identity transformation when you become a mother. You can't imagine not being a mom anymore. You see a kid, and you're like, how can I help you? Like, you're just so wired to love and serve and care for these other children. You see a kid without a mom, you're like, whose kid is that? We're going to find this. We're going to make sure, it's your whole identity, it changes. You change your schedule, change your priority, you change your money, right? You spend all your money, you're like, I have no idea where all the money went. This is fatherhood too. I just think mothers are probably better, but it's fatherhood too, right? You change your life. Everything changes about who you are because of this new identity or this new purpose. Most cultural Christians are more babysitters than mothers, spiritual babysitters. It's easier to check the box to say, I did the dishes, I made the food, I cleaned the house, I cared for a friend. But spiritually, Jesus is saying, I'm inviting you into something totally different. It's a new identity. It's a new purpose. You're still yourself. You have your same education. You have your same dreams and goals. But he says, I'm gonna shape it. I'm gonna do something new with it. I'm gonna take what's there and bring out the best of who you are. A babysitter, a mother's going to give her life for her kids. Babysitter's going to be like, I'll think about it, right? I mean, everybody says they would, but a mother is like absolutely giving everything. But a babysitter, just a couple hours, a couple bucks, and I'm in for it. As we think about the life of a disciple and following Jesus, Jesus doesn't want you to be a babysitter. Come to church a couple hours a week, give a couple of $100. He wants you to have a full life. Jesus is inviting you in to be a part of a new identity and purpose. He's inviting you to learn faith on the way. You notice that phrase? Jesus is inviting his disciples as they're going. He's like, let's talk about this. As they're moving, he's engaging with them, moving with them on the way. Go into the world and live in faith. Let me make this practical. And I wrote some practical things down. This is not exhaustive, but this is practical. What would it look like to have a transformed identity and live in the world? You're a follower of Jesus. You're identified with the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. The Spirit of God lives inside of you, and you have the full access to new spiritual gifts and power through the resurrection of Jesus. That's what we believe. You have the Spirit of God moving you. So when a new job opportunity comes and your boss says, I want you to apply for this job, I want you to take this next step and this next level, you might say, I'm not interested. And someone might say, why wouldn't you take this promotion? Why wouldn't you take this next thing? And you might say, this conflicts with my ability to be present with my family. It's going to require too many hours. It's going to require too much stress and engagement. And my priority and my identity is following Jesus. And this is going to prohibit. So right now, I need to stay where I am. That may be a difference in success, but you're saying what's most critical is who I am walking with Jesus. Somebody say, well, why don't you get a new car? That thing is old. And you might say, I want to give more resources to justice and to ministries that are for the poor and caring for those who are struggling. And you don't have to say this like bragging, but if people say, well, why don't you use your money for this? Or why don't you really let your boss know how you really feel? I can't believe you let them treat you like that. And you might say, well, as an identity, I'm learning grace and mercy. I need grace and mercy. I want to learn how Jesus shows grace and mercy to me, I want to learn how to show that to my boss. You might even say, someone might say, why are you fighting so hard to be at the top of your company? Why are you fighting so hard for advancement in your career? And you would say, I want Jesus to be seen in every corner of my office so that no matter what I do, I am showing Christ. You notice those are two opposite things. One says I'm not advancing, one says I am advancing in my career. It's not about the action, it's about the motivation. As a person identified with Christ, it's less about focused on these tangible actions and more about what is driving you to experience Christ in that sense. So you could do opposite things that God says are good. And this is why seeing is more than just getting new eyes. It's regularly coming to God and say, Lord, what am I not seeing correctly? Help me to see what I can't see in front of me. It's not about what the action is, it's about what's driving the action. And so Jesus is inviting us into a radically transformed relationship with him. On the way, we're going with him, and we're going to need the fuel of faith. So what is faith? Faith is seeing what is not yet able to be seen. Faith is trusting God when you don't have the full 100% proof that you need to move forward. Faith is dynamic. It's engaging. It's asking God. It's asking these questions. Peter bringing Jesus aside, you kind of respect his tenacity to say, hey, Jesus, we got to talk about this, right? But he's doing something. He's not just like, oh, I'll think about it later. Peter is, teach me, Jesus. Tell me what it means to live this way. You can live a simple life as a Christian, and you can do some nice things, you can pray some nice prayers, and you can just go about your way, and it's fine. But I wonder if many of us are struggling with depression and anxiety and fear and complacency and shame and guilt because we have a very surface level view of our relationship with Jesus. And he says to us, I'm inviting you in to something that's not just checking the boxes, but it's engaging your soul. What is it about? What are you driving for that you're hungry for? Come to me. If you're hungry, you're weary, you're thirsty, come to me. I wonder if many of us treated our friends like we treat Jesus. And by that I mean, if you're in a room with someone, generally, you're going to strike up conversation, right? So you're both in there, hey, how's it going? Not bad. How are you? I'm good. You're going to engage with them, right? But I wonder if we just almost have this separate thing where we're going to chill over here, and then Jesus is over there, and he wants to engage with us. We're like, oh, cool. And we're not willing to converse in just like a daily sense. Lord, what do you want from me in my career? What do you want with me for my kids? Lord, teach me. Why am I struggling with this same thing all the time? Why do I keep going back to this thing I know is bad for me? Lord, where am I deficient? Where can I see? Lord, where have you put me? Where can I encourage a brother? Where can I encourage a sister? Like, are we just engaged with the Lord in that way? And if we're not, I think we're missing what the purpose of the kingdom is. It's to be tangible, physical. This is why this year and a half has been so hard for me and for you, is because we're not engaged in the relationships as we were meant to be. We're not engaged with people that are struggling with sin and struggling with faith in a right way. And so we're missing a component and piece of the discipleship or the following Jesus that all of us are used to having. And so I really wonder if we're ready to get back to a conviction of faith and a commitment to others and ourselves and our own souls. And if we've been really just complacent too long and just like, oh, when this ends, I'm going to get back to it. But Jesus is saying, no. Are you ready to go in faith? Let's move forward. So church, I've been like hammering the same theme for weeks, but I want you to own your faith. I want you to own what it means to walk with God, Maybe you're reading scripture. Maybe you're praying with a friend, but it's not just to do the right things. It's to be made whole and made full. Jesus wants your life to be flourishing. As I said last week, it's not just about washing your hands the right way. It's about receiving heart flourishing from him. So I'm going to pray, and I'm going to let God do his work in you. He's going to give you wisdom. He's going to give you eyesight. You're going to go in prayer and say, Lord, help me to see what I can't see. Give me strength when I cannot walk. And you will trust him. So let me pray, and we'll move into a time of worship.